her gün daha karanlık bir sürecin içine giriyor Türkiye. Demokraside ciddi kayıplar var. Dolayısıyla hepimizin mücadele etmesi lazım.
It's the largest organized act of dissent in Turkey in the wake of last year's attempted coup. Adalet, or justice, is the main theme. A challenge to the ruling Justice and Development Party, or AK Party.
Zaten yapılan iş şu anda hukuki değildir. Asla bu ülkeye bir şey kazandıramayacağı gibi kendilerine de bir şey kazandırmayacak. Kim olursa olsun, eğer birileri bırakın siz hükmetmeyi, tavsiye dahi edemez.
The match to the flame of outrage, a 25-year prison sentence given to an opposition Republican People's Party, or CHP, member of parliament. Enis Berberoğlu was convicted of revealing state secrets, specifically providing an opposition newspaper with video purporting to show Turkey's intelligence agency trucking weapons into Syria. Ankara says the trucks were carrying humanitarian aid and that the leak amounts to treason. When the story was published in Turkey's oldest secular newspaper, Cumhuriyet, President Erdogan said those involved will pay a heavy price. Now, it appears that's the case. Enis Berberoğlu is the first member of Turkey's main opposition party to be handed a prison sentence since the lifting of parliamentary immunity last year. Turkish Prime Minister Binali Yıldırım has warned that the CHP is risking unintended consequences, and that apart from the HDP, all other parties in parliament supported the lifting of immunity from prosecution, including the CHP. The CHP has also come under criticism from non-AK party supporters for remaining silent when MPs from the People's Democratic Party, or HDP, were imprisoned for alleged ties to the PKK terror group after the state of emergency was introduced. But despite accusations of hypocrisy, Berberoğlu's conviction and prison sentence has heightened concerns over the separation of powers under the ongoing state of emergency. More than 100,000 people have been sacked since last year's attempted coup. Among them are thousands of judges and prosecutors with alleged links to the PKK terror group and FETÖ. But for the government and its supporters, this march signifies support for the leaking of state secrets with a hollow slogan. Those marching are expected to arrive in Istanbul less than a week before the one-year anniversary of the foiled coup attempt. And while it will mark a moment of national trauma and triumph, many here will be more concerned with what lies ahead. Randolph Noble, The Newsmakers.
Well, to discuss this, I'm joined in the studio by former Deputy Chairman of the CHP and Member of Parliament, Faruk Loğoğlu. And from New York, we have Onur Erim, who is an advisor to the Mayor of Ankara. Mr. Loğoğlu, did Enis Berberoğlu commit a crime?
I think it's up to the court to decide. The case is in the hands of the court. He has been detained, yes, but he's still facing trial. And until we have the final ruling from the court, I think we have to assume...
But there has been a ruling. But there has been a ruling.
Yeah, but I think there are, several steps yet to be taken. Case
so
appeals.
These are the appeals?
Yes, the
right,
appeals.
okay, so there's appeals. But,
yeah.
I mean, in your personal opinion, do you believe he committed a crime and that the punishment was too harsh, or that he didn't commit a crime? Because I think that's crucial.
Well, I think in my very private, educated judgment, I certainly feel he did not commit a crime.
Endangering national security, that was in the judgment. Onur Erim, tell me how he endangered national security if that was the case.
Well, it's been perceived and it's been portrayed, and I certainly agree with the decision, that it's been an act of espionage. There isn't a nation in the world, there isn't a country in the world that doesn't treat espionage as immortal or as a military offense of the greatest criminality. So revealing this, let alone revealing it, obtaining this information is espionage, and I think that's what the court ruled as.
Faruk Loğoğlu, there was a video. He gave this video to journalists. As an MP, was that the right thing to do?
Look, I think, going into the details of this case might be useful, but let me say this. The same information was used by other news media outlets long before Enis Berberoğlu and Cumhuriyet newspaper printed the same information. And not only news media, but also high-standing politicians referred to the same issue, pronounced their position on the issue. They have not been faced with any charges, criminal charges of any kind, but only the newspapers and the source of the news in that paper is being charged with espionage.
So you believe that he was particularly targeted because he's a CHP, he's a CHP?
Well,
MP?
I think, yeah, of course, that's a different dimension of the
Right.
problem. The lifting of the immunities of members of parliament in 2016 was wrong. It was unconstitutional.
But the CHP was for it.
CHP did wrong. They,
Right.
in fact, they said this is unconstitutional, but we are still going to support it.
But there's an argument to say that, you know, where were the CHP members when HDP politicians found themselves in trouble after the lifting of the immunity? This is what HDP politicians are saying. Now, you kept quiet. Now suddenly you want to talk about
By the
immunity.
way, I am not currently a deputy chairman. I'm a former,
Right.
and I'm not a member of the parliament at the moment. There were two problems. It was unconstitutional, and number two, even worse, it was retroactive.
Right.
That is to say, these members of parliament which had files either in the parliament or in the Ministry of Justice, those things didn't happen when these things could be considered to be a crime by the courts. So, you know, going backwards in terms of legislation, that's a basic violation.
Okay, so you disagree with it, and you know, so the party went for it. You, as an deputy chairman and ex-MP, you disagree with it. Let's park that aside for a moment.
And there were others in the party who did.
Certainly. It's been an extraordinary year. Lots of people have lost their jobs. Lots of people who are members of the AKP have also, you know, lost their jobs, been kicked out and so on. Isn't it reasonable to think that if Mr. Berberoğlu was an AKP MP as well and he did this, he'd be facing exactly the same judgment, 25 years for treason?
That's entirely possible. That's entirely possible. This is why, after the amendment in the Parliament to the Constitution, to Article 83 of the Constitution concerning immunities, the hands of the courts are tied. They have to treat the cases before them on the basis of equality, not on the basis of a former member of Parliament who had enjoyed immunity.
Okay, and currently outside of Parliament, you have members of Parliament from the CHP marching from Ankara towards Istanbul, being led by Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu. They see it as a righteous march, and they see their party as being under attack because of this sentence. Onur, how do you respond to that?
Well, I mean, as in many cases, we cannot usually understand what CHP does and why they do it. And I think this is one of those cases. Now, there has been a ruling. First of all, it's not a 25-year sentence. The sentence is actually a lifetime sentence. It was reduced to 25 years in considering such matters by the court. It's what it is exactly. It's actually a court case involving aspiring, also including Mr. Gül and Mr. Dündar. Now, the two other, the court hasn't ruled yet. The court went ahead and said we're going to treat all three differently. The first ruling was on Enis Berberoğlu. Now, let's go back for a second. The video is in question. The videos in question that were distributed by Mr. Berberoğlu to Mr. Dündar are official videos taped by the gendarmerie forces that did the stopping of the national security agency's trucks. Now, obtaining this video in itself is actually an act of espionage, let alone releasing it, let alone sharing it with public. So right now, what CHP is doing is they're using as they call it, their democratic right to march to, I believe, to the jail that Mr. Berberoğlu is spending his sentence right now. On the act that Mr. Berberoğlu's ruling by the court, as he has committed the crime especially, for example, in the U.S., a capital crime of espionage against the military and against the government. Now, what we are discussing here is not what anybody did, what was in the trucks, who did it, why they did it. Now, the government of Turkey has never disclaimed the fact that these trucks are owned or they were ordered to deliver the National Security Agency's cargo from one point to the other.
Yes.
Now, just again, obtaining this video just by itself is an act of espionage, and that's what Mr. Berberoğlu was found guilty for.
Yeah,
what the march is all about.
Loğoğlu is saying,
CHP is now marching.
Sure. What he's saying is that other people had the video, they disseminated it. So why is Mr. Berberoğlu under scrutiny if he shared something that was already out there?
Now, let's not forget, let's again go back for a second. On May 17, 2015, Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu visited the Today Zaman newspaper as chief editor-in-chief, Mr. Ekrem Dumanlı. And 3 days later, he revealed that he saw these videotapes. Only within a matter of days, just about, I think it was 9 or 10 days before the general elections of June 2015, this was on the national newspaper of Cumhuriyet. Now, the then editor-in-chief, Mr. Dündar, said he got these from a member of the parliament when he was asked. And then, I guess later in the court, it was revealed and it was proven that it was actually Mr. Berberoğlu that serviced these tapes to Mr. Dündar to only, be on the headlines of a national newspaper like Cumhuriyet for the first time. The videos, the incident was, yes, written once or twice, I believe, before by other members of the news media in print. But it was the first time detailing the video itself in a national newspaper. And again, let me remind you, this video was not taped by a media personnel. It was not taped by a TV station. It was the official video of the gendarmerie, which should have not been disclosed. It's a government property. Just getting that, obtaining that video itself is an act of crime.
So it was an official video of the gendarmerie. Let me pose that to Mr. Faruk Loğoğlu. Does any of that convince you that a crime was committed?
No, not at all. I think the details are not that important. I mean, what we are talking about is not the particulars of the Enis Berberoğlu case. We are talking about a grander issue.
What is the grander issue? Of
justice, of the independence of the judiciary. The march by CHP, by Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu, is not for or about just Berberoğlu. It's about the case of justice of all other MPs and other people in Turkey.
But it seems to be convenient that the march is undertaken only when a CHP MP
that's a point to be. I can criticize that point. I'm not comfortable with that point of view. I think this march should have started earlier, perhaps.
But is there any evidence that the judge who made this particular conviction or judgment was influenced by the executive?
That, I think, is for the official authorities.
But you see, again, I'm asking, where's the evidence that he was influenced by the executive? There's a separation of powers.
Look,
the CHP doesn't like the judgment.
The question of the independence of the judiciary and the influence of political authorities on the judiciary have been on Turkey's agenda for years now. This alone indicates to the existence of a very severe problem. And this debate is not just in Turkey. The Council of Europe, the European Union, and others have also been critical, have made comments, observations.
Okay, but what's your biggest problem with the judiciary right now?
That independence of judiciary is not guaranteed by the current arrangements.
But do you agree that, especially with the Gulen movement, since the judiciary was infiltrated by them, that it was a correct move by the state to try and weed them out?
Of course, I think rooting them out is one thing, and they should continue doing that. Probably there are still many points at which they are influential. But rooting them out does not equal automatically independent judiciary.
Understandably, yes, yes. So when Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu gets to Istanbul, what do you expect to happen? Some say he might even get arrested himself, but what do you want to happen? What
I
do you
think
expect to
what we are experiencing now is a constant accumulation of the idea that we need justice, and that this march by Kılıçdaroğlu, joined by different groups of people, will in the end prove useful. And if it does, it is also good for the government, not just CHP. This is not about CHP. This is about Turkey, justice in Turkey. And if this march in any way contributes to the enhancement of justice and its meting out in Turkey to everyone, for everyone, it's a good thing for Turkey.
Okay.
So let's be patient and see what happens.
Okay, so Onur Erim, is this march going to be good for justice in Turkey?
Well, let's just look at the start. When Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu kick-started this march a few days ago with a poster, there was a big group of military officers in the background. Knowing Turkish history with military coups and whatnot, and military's or CHP's relationship with military, I think that gave mixed messages to everybody. Had this been a true march for democracy, had this been a true march for justice, I don't think he would have chosen that the background as for his poster. I think just the start itself gives it a very good idea what this is all about. Mr. Loğoğlu mentioned that this is Mr. Berberoğlu's case was a small thing as opposed to a grand scheme of things in Turkish justice system. I'm sorry to disagree, but this is a very big deal. It's a very big case. It would have been even worse in many countries in the world. Look at Julian Assange. He's been in an embassy since 2010, committing probably less of a crime than this. So it doesn't matter where it's in the world. This case is a very big case. Let's not mix this up. And I agree that there are some uncertainties and there are some faults with the Turkish justice system, as in any justice system around the world. So this is a very big case. This is a very important matter. Now let's not forget, none of the members of this spy ring of Mr. Gül, Mr. Dündar, Mr. Berberoğlu has never denied obtaining this video.
Okay.
They have never denied servicing this video.
Right.
All they have been saying that this was an act of media professionalism,
right. Okay.
Which it is not in anywhere in the world.
Okay, because we're running out of time, let me get Mr. Loğoğlu to give a final response here, sir.
I will have to return to the grander issue at stake. The march for justice is just that, to improve the quality, the timing, and the distribution of justice for all Turkish citizens. Whether they have been accused or sentenced by courts, they still need justice. And I think this is the first time that the main opposition party has galvanized the public and has occupied the TV and other media outlets with this march. Let's all pray that this will serve Turkey for good.
Okay, gentlemen, I think it's been an important discussion to have. Faruk Loğoğlu and Onur Erim, thank you very much for joining us on the Newsmakers.